Hey everybody. Alright, so now we're going to talk about the part of quadratic equations that deals with solving by the quadratic formula. This is just another one of the things in our little bag of tricks. So let's take a look. We have a quadratic equation and we have a quadratic formula. Now they are different. The quadratic equation is, sorry about that, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. That's the equation. And the solution to that, if you can't factor it or if you can't do anything else with it, and you need to use a quadratic formula, the solution is x is going to be minus b plus or minus the square root of bc minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And I know that you know some ways to remember that, some little songs. In class I'll teach you a song. I don't think I want to sing it on the internet though, so okay, here we go. Anyway, but the quadratic formula solves the quadratic equation. Okay, so let's look at example number 6. We have the quadratic equation 2x squared minus 6x plus 1 equals 0. And we want to figure out what the values of x will be, and we know there are going to be two values. We know that a is 2, that b is negative 6, and that c is 1. So when we plug into the quadratic formula, minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a, we get minus 6 plus or minus the square root of minus 6 squared minus 4 times 2 times 1 divided by 2 times 2. And when we calculate this, and by the way, when you're doing this, don't do it with a calculator. Or if you do it with a calculator, don't put it in as a string, because you want to know what the value of the number under the radical sign is. We're not going to deal with decimal answers. We want exact answers. So anyhow, 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 minus 8, and that's going to be over 4. So let's deal with the 36 minus 8. That's going to be 6 plus or minus the square root of 28 over 4. Now we need to know what is the square root of 28. Not as a decimal. You're not going to put square root of 28 into your calculator. You are going to figure this out. The square root of 28 is the square root of 4 times 7. Since 4 is a perfect square, we can take that outside of the radical sign and make it 2 times the square root of 7. So now we have 6 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 7 divided by 4. We're not done yet. Remember, you can't just start canceling the 2 and the 4. You have to factor something out of the numerator, which will be a 2. So when we factor out a 2, we have 2 times the quantity, 3 plus or minus the square root of 7, and that will be over 4. Now we can cancel the 2 and the 4, and we get 3 plus or minus the square root of 7 over 2. With me? Okay, let's go on. Go ahead and do checkpoint number 6. Pause this, and when you get done, hit the resume key and we'll move on. Moving on, we have example number 7. And example number 7 is 3x squared minus 2x plus 4 equals 0. In this case, a is 3, b is minus 2, c is 4. And when we plug into our quadratic formula, we have negative 2 plus or minus the square root of minus 2, the quantity squared, minus 4 times 3 times 4. Please remember that first term, it will always be positive, because it doesn't matter whether b is positive or negative. And I'm talking about under the radical sign. When you square a negative or square a positive, you get a positive. So, of course, this is going to be over 2 times 3. So we'll have 2 plus or minus 4 minus 48 all over 6, which gives us 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 44 over 6. Now, the square root of negative 44, let's go up here to the top and look at the square root of negative 44. You can't, in the real number system, you cannot take the square root of a negative number. However, since we have already defined the square root of negative 1 as I, to show us that it's an imaginary number, we can change this to 4 times 11 times minus 1. The square root of 4 is 2, And the square root of -1 is I, and then we have just the square root of 11. So that's what this comes down to. Okay, so let's do 2 plus or minus 2y square root 11 over 6. And once again, now we need to factor out something from the numerator here. We're going to factor out a 2. I'm going to move up here to the top. So we'll have 2 times the quantity 1 plus or minus I square root of 11. I'm putting the I in front of the square root sign so it doesn't look like it's still inside the radical sign. Okay, that just kind of by convention we do that. And okay, it's over 6. So now we can factor, now we can cancel, and we have 1 plus or minus I square root of 11 over 3. We can always also write this as 1/3 plus or minus I square root of 11 over 3. Okay, so pause this and go do your checkpoint number 7. And there's the baby. It's all over. See you next time, folks.